I stood in the marble foyer of the Richardson family's Beacon Hill mansion, holding the stack of mail I had just retrieved. Through the leaded glass windows, I could see their Rolls-Royce parked in the circular driveway, the same car that, according to the letter in my hands, was to be repossessed by midnight. My husband, Charles, was hosting another family fortune strategy meeting in his father's study, the same meeting they'd held every Thursday for the past decade, supposedly managing their vast investment portfolio. I had never been allowed to attend. Family only, darling, my mother-in-law, Margaret, would say with her practiced society smile. You understand. After 5 years of marriage, I finally understood perfectly. The envelope from Boston First National was marked Urge E&T Final Notice in angry red letters. Below it, the eviction notice from their property management company was equally clear. Payment overdue, 7 months. Total amount due, $385,000. Darling, is that the mail? Margaret's voice floated down the hallway, perfectly modulated as always. She appeared in a fresh Channel suit, pearls gleaming. I'll take those. Must be more investment reports. Actually, I said, holding the stack just out of reach, I think we should discuss these in the study, with everyone. Margaret's smile flickered. That won't be necessary. Charles and his father are handling some rather complex portfolio matters. Like the repossession of the Rolls? I asked quietly, or the eviction from this house? The perfect posture slipped for just a moment. I'm sure there's been a mistake. No mistake. I held up the property management company's letter. 7 months of unpaid rent. Interesting, since you told everyone at the charity gala last week that you owned this house outright. We do. Margaret's voice rose slightly. It's been in the family for generations. It's been rented from the Morrison Trust for the past 15 years, I corrected. I checked the property records, just like I checked everything else. The study door opened and Charles appeared. Mother, what's going on? Your wife is making ridiculous accusations, Margaret began, but I was already walking past her into the study. Theodore Richardson II sat behind his massive mahogany desk, looking every inch the wealthy patriarch in his bespoke suit. The same suit, I now knew, purchased on a maxed-out credit card 6 months ago. Ah, Jennifer, he said smoothly. We're rather busy with family matters. Perfect. I dropped the stack of mail on his desk. Let's talk about family matters. Like how Boston's wealthiest family can't pay their rent. Charles moved to stop me, but I was already pulling out my laptop. Honey, what are you doing? Showing you the truth, I said, opening files I'd spent months compiling. About your family's supposed $800 million fortune. Theodore's face darkened. Now see here. No, you see, I interrupted, turning the screen toward them. Bank statements, credit reports, property records, everything the Richardsons have been hiding for the past 20 years. Margaret sank into a leather armchair. Those are private. Private because they're fake or private because they're embarrassing? I asked. Like the fact that this mansion isn't yours. That the Rolls-Royce is 3 payments away from repossession. That your bank account has less than $200 in it. Charles stared at the screen, his face pale. Dad, what is she talking about? I clicked through documents methodically. Your family's investment portfolio is empty. The trust fund you live on doesn't exist. The private jet you brag about, rented for events when you can still afford it, which, according to these credit card statements, you can't anymore. The study's elegant wood-paneled walls suddenly seemed to close in as decades of financial fiction began to unravel. Every charity board you sit on, I continued, looking at Margaret, every social club membership, every society event, all maintained on credit cards that are now maxed out. 17 of them, to be exact. Theodore stood up, his authority crumbling. You had no right to investigate. I had every right, I countered. Because you've been using my family's reputation to secure loans. My father's bank, remember? Where you claimed to have millions in assets. Charles looked like he might be sick. The summer house in Newport. Rented, then abandoned when you couldn't pay. The art collection, replicas, the investment properties, they don't exist. Margaret's perfectly manicured hands trembled. We had to maintain appearances. By lying? I asked. By pretending to be Boston's oldest money family while dodging creditors and living on borrowed time. I pulled up another document. You want to know what the Richardsons are really worth? I had a forensic accountant do a complete analysis. Assets minus debts, minus credit card balances, minus loans. Stop, Theodore whispered, but I continued. Negative $4.2 million, I announced. That's your real net worth. Boston's wealthiest family is actually millions in debt, living on credit cards and lies. The elegant study felt airless as Charles collapsed into his father's leather chair, staring at the financial autopsy of his family's lies. Outside, the Rolls-Royce still gleamed in the driveway, a repossession target masquerading as a symbol of wealth. The Aspen Ski Lodge, he said numbly. The one where we spent every timeshare, I supplied, until they canceled your membership for non-payment 3 months ago. Those photos you posted? All staged during the free promotional weekend. Margaret attempted to rally. Darling, you don't understand the pressures of maintaining our social position. I understand fraud, I cut in, pulling up more documents, like using fake bank statements to join charity boards or claiming non-existent assets to secure loans. The SEC would understand, too. Theodore's face had gone ashen. You wouldn't dare. The Beacon Hill Association board meeting is tomorrow, I continued. The one where you're supposed to announce another $1 million donation. Should I show them these documents too? Charles scrolled through years of credit card statements. The gala last month when you announced the new Richardson Family Foundation. Doesn't exist, I confirmed, just like the scholarships you promised to 3 universities, the endowments you pledged to 5 museums, and the charitable trusts you claimed to manage. Margaret stood shakily. We had appearances to maintain. Our position in society is built on lies, I finished, and it's about to collapse. The caterer from the gala is pressing charges over the bounced check. The private school wants its last 2 years of tuition. The country club is canceling your membership. The antique grandfather clock, a rental, I now knew, ticked loudly in the corner as decades of deception unraveled. Your sister's wedding next month, I said to Charles. The one your parents promised to pay for at the plaza? The hotel's threatening legal action over the deposit check that bounced. Theodore made one last stand. We can explain everything. The investments are just temporarily non-existent, I interrupted. Like the offshore accounts you brag about, the real estate portfolio you claim to manage, the private equity firm that exists only on letterhead. I pulled up surveillance photos. Here's your father last week, I told Charles, not at the board meeting he claimed to attend, but sneaking out the service entrance of the club to avoid creditors. And your mother? Those charity luncheons are actually meetings with payday loan officers. Margaret's perfect composure cracked. You've been following us. The same private investigators you claim to have on retainer, I said. Turns out they're happy to work for someone who actually pays them. Charles looked up from the laptop. The trust fund you promised our children is as empty as everything else, I confirmed gently. The private school tuition you thought was guaranteed. The inheritances they were promised, all fiction. The weight of generational lies settled over the study like dust on the rented antiques. Tomorrow morning, I announce, the Boston Globe is running an expose, the fall of the Richardson fortune, how Boston's wealthiest family built an empire on empty promises. You can't, Margaret whispered. Our reputation is already gone, I said. The banks are calling in their loans. The creditors are filing lawsuits. The social clubs are revoking memberships. Your carefully constructed world of wealth and privilege is over. Theodore reached for his phone. I'll call our attorneys, who stopped representing you 6 months ago for non-payment, I finished. Would you like to see that letter too? The sun was setting outside the study windows, casting long shadows over the room where Boston's most elaborate financial fiction was finally ending. Why? Charles asked his parents. Why maintain this lie for so long? Margaret's tears threatened to ruin her perfect makeup. We couldn't lose our position, our status. After your grandfather lost the real fortune, 20 years ago, I filled in. But instead of admitting it, you created this elaborate fantasy. Borrowed and lied and pretended, dragging your children into a life that was never real. 6 months after the exposure of the Richardson family's financial fiction, I sat in our new apartment, watching Charles adjust to life without the golden facade. The 2-bedroom walk-up in Somerville was a far cry from the Beacon Hill mansion, but it was honest. We actually owned it. The Globe is running a follow-up story, Charles said, showing me his phone. The fall of Boston's social elite, how the Richardson scandal exposed high society's house of cards. The aftermath had been spectacular. The eviction from the mansion made local news, with camera crews capturing Margaret and Theodore Richardson being escorted out past their repossessed Rolls-Royce. Their social circle imploded as other families rushed to distance themselves and hide their own financial fictions. "Your sister's doing better," I noted, reviewing the family update emails. The small wedding in her backyard was lovely, more real than the plaza could ever have been. Elizabeth had adapted surprisingly well, admitting she'd always felt suffocated by the pressure to maintain their fictional wealth. Her new husband, a public school teacher, had helped her find peace with their authentic life. "Dad's starting therapy next week," Charles added quietly. The counselor specializes in families affected by generational wealth trauma. Apparently, we're not the first to build a life on financial lies. Theodore and Margaret now lived in a rented condo in Revere, their designer wardrobes replaced by off-the-rack clothes. Theodore had taken a job as a real estate agent, his first actual work in 30 years. Margaret volunteered at the library, finding a different kind of status in honest service. The creditors' meeting went better than expected, I said, reviewing my notes. With the payment plan in place, they might be debt-free in 15 years. The total damage had been staggering, $6.8 million in debts once everything was uncovered. Credit cards, personal loans, bounced checks, unpaid bills, decades of maintaining a fictional fortune had nearly destroyed them. "You know what's strange?" Charles mused, looking around our modest apartment. "I feel more secure now than I ever did in that mansion. At least I know this is real." The doorbell rang, a regular doorbell, not the elaborate chime system from their former life. It was Elizabeth, carrying grocery bags. "Family dinner," she announced, heading to our small kitchen. Real food this time, not catered pretense. We'd started a new tradition, weekly family dinners where we cooked ourselves, talked honestly, and rebuilt relationships based on truth rather than appearances. "Mom called," Elizabeth said as she unpacked ingredients. "She's thinking of writing a book, Confessions of a Fake Socialite. Her therapist thinks it might help others trapped in the same cycle." The scandal had exposed similar facades throughout Boston's high society. Other families had come forward, admitting to their own financial fictions. Support groups formed for children raised in these elaborate pretenses. "The funny thing is," Charles said, helping chop vegetables, "we're actually happier now. No more lying awake wondering when it would all fall apart. No more pretending to be something we're not." The smell of honest cooking filled our apartment as the sun set over Somerville. Through the window, we could see other families in their homes, real lives, not carefully curated displays of wealth. Sometimes, Elizabeth reflected, losing everything fake is the only way to find what's real. Theodore and Margaret arrived for dinner, looking older but somehow more authentic without their designer armor. They brought a homemade dessert, Margaret's first attempt at baking in 30 years. As we sat around our IKEA dining table, eating food we prepared ourselves in dishes we'd bought with money we actually had, I realized that wealth isn't always about what you own. Sometimes it's about owning up to the truth.